and Indigenous Frontier Technology and Research Center. I am very happy to welcome you all for the webinar on NutriGarden for optimal nutrition and health. This webinar is conducted to celebrate World Food Day 2021. The theme for World Food Day this year is Our Actions are Our Future, Better Production, Better Nutrition, Better Environment and a Better Life. Since 1981, World Food Day has been celebrated on the 16th October. The theme mainly focuses on the importance of food security, with most of them revolving around agriculture. Food security continues to be a matter of grave concern for India, despite being the second largest producer of food. Encouraging gardening in educational institutions, public places, and at household level will provide constant supply of fruits and vegetables sufficient to meet part of the nutrient requirements, and also will help to increase physical activity and may give sense of happiness and satisfaction. We are very fortunate to have with us today Dr. Satya, Head of the Department Pediatric, Chengalpattu Medical College, who have established Nutrition Park at Chengalpattu Government Hospital, assisted by MS Swaminathan Research Foundation, to enlighten the essential nutrients, adequate diet, exercise, and rest during the first 1,000 days of life, that is from conception up to her child's second birthday. This park is designed in the shape of a fetus. Actually, her original idea was to design it as a home to tomb, but then it's a very larger scale. She decided to now restrict her idea to fetus-shaped nutrition park. Doctor, I am delighted to welcome you on behalf of Nutrition Society of India, Chennai chapter, Ethraj College for Women, and Indigenous Frontier Technology and Research Center. And thank you very much for accepting our invitation. Looking forward to an enlightening session. Once again, I welcome one and all for the webinar. Now over to Dr. Muthu Meenakshi, Head of the Department, Ethraj College for Women, for the introduction.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for that welcome address. I would like to present our speaker to you for today. We are here to listen to and familiarize ourselves with the topic NutriGarden for optimal nutrition and health. NutriGarden is a promising cost-effective solution to tackle malnourishment by adopting a sustainable life cycle approach to promote the nutrition status of the vulnerable section of the population through dietary diversification. We have amid us a befitting speaker, Dr. Satya Jagannathan, a pioneer in this domain. Madam has spearheaded the designing and creation of a nutrition park in association with Dr. MS Swaminathan Research Foundation at Chengalpattu Medical College. The garden has been created with an objective to foster and promote healthy eating in the first 1,000 days of life, a time spanning between conception and the child's second birthday, which provides a window of opportunity to build healthier future, both for the mothers and their children. Madam has a remarkable career in pediatrics, spanning for more than 2 decades, and is currently heading the Department of Pediatrics, Chengalpattu Medical College. Having done a master's in pediatrics at Madras Medical College, she went on to do her second master's in pediatrics, the public health domain, at Johns Hopkins University, Baltimore, USA. Ma'am has also undergone a training in neonatal medicine at Macedonia Melani Hospital, Italy, which has championed her initiative to develop a neonatal care ward at Chengalpattu Medical College. I am pleased to welcome you, ma'am, and I hand over this session to you. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Thank you for your kind words. Am I audible, madam? Or
Yes, ma'am, you're audible,
okay.
Ma'am.
Okay. I thank the Nutrition Society of India, Tamil Nadu chapter, for inviting me for this occasion. And I feel it's a great privilege to be part of this initiative, because as a pediatrician, for many years, I've been thinking why our children have to suffer just because of malnutrition. And about 60 to 90% of the population we face in the pediatric population is mainly because of malnutrition or the faulty child rearing practices. And it had been a kind of a worry for me why this is happening. And today I will just share with you because I think we are a mixture of students who are currently doing nutrition, and we have also senior people. So I divide my lecture into 4 parts, where the initial part will tell about the current National Family Health Survey data of about our country and our state. And then I will tell what is happening in the rural hospitals like Chengalpattu Medical College, and why we moved on to the nutrition garden. And then we had some experiences with the rural folks through different research. They asked us a lot of questions why this is happening. And then when we are not able to answer the rural folk, so I'll put forth those questions to you. And then I will talk a little bit about the 1,000 days of life and how stress affects the life of the mother and the child. And then I'll be talking about the nutrition garden. So initially, I just want to tell that for the new students that the National Family Health Survey 5 has started capturing data during 2014 to 19. And it provides the indicator for the sustainable developmental goals that we as a country to achieve by 2030. And in order to achieve that, along with the previous indicators, now they have added newly like the bathing practices during menstruation, and then maternal health. And for the first time, they've also sought the percentage of women who would ever use the internet. But now, as per this data now, there is a lot of bad news for us. The child stunting has worsened in many states, and even a progressive state like Kerala, the child stunting has increased. And Goa, the child stunting has increased, and Telangana as well. And when we take the weight of the child wasting is also big bad news for us as a nutritionist and for the pediatricians. The child wasting low weight as per one's height became worse in many states, especially Kerala, Ladakh, and others. And what happened to the underweight children? Again, the bad news awaits us. In case of underweight, Kerala has showed an increase from 16.1 to 19.7. But on the contrary, Bihar has showed improvement from 43.9 to 41%. So now we are a bit worried why this is happening. Is it because of the pandemic or some other issues that is being currently in the society which is not being addressed by the policymakers and by us? Now, the significance of the NFHS data results says that there is a massive increase in child malnutrition, and there is rising levels of anemia in women and pregnant ladies, which clearly implies that children born during 2015 to 19 might be suffering from deficiencies. Though India displayed an improvement in child nutrition during the 3rd and 4th survey, now our country has taken a U-turn for the worse in terms of malnutrition. So as a pediatrician and as nutritionist, now we have to think at the country level, this is happening. So what we can do at the local level to reverse the situation. And this is the anemia, current prevalence of anemia. And the hunger index also shows the India had fallen from 101 to 94 in the hunger index. And we are even behind Pakistan and Nepal. So this really, it makes us worried about the future of the children. So now we have to think globally as well as locally. There are many policies are happening at the international level and the national level, which affects the life of the farmers, the families, the children, where it increases the inequality among the families. But locally, as a doctor, as a nutritionist in my place, what I can do to address this, though our voices may not be heard at the global level, small efforts can be done by our team locally to bridge the gap between the haves and the have-nots, and then to reduce the inequality due to the malnutrition. So this is a case I had seen, and one grandmother, she asked me why my grandchild has got a gap at the back. So these conditions are called as neural tube defects, and mainly the main cause is not having enough folate in the maternal serum when the mother is conceived. So when the grandmother asked, then I told her, like, there are many reasons. It could be environmental or it could be some other, but one of that could be nutritional. And she said, but so far nobody had told us that if I had taken a particular vitamin, my grandchild would not be like this. So it was a big question. And then she asked what I can do to prevent my daughter to have a next child, normal child. Then we told her that you have to have folate, which is a vitamin, which will help in the fusion of the um, neural tube. But is this a preventable condition? In our country, 1.4 to 1.9 children per thousand live births are born with such neural tube defects, and most of these are preventable. So in many countries, they have found that fortification of the floor with folic acid has a major impact on the neural tube defects. And Chile had shown 55% reduction in the neural tube defect prevalence between over a decade. But this cannot be done in our country. It's mainly because we have other forms of anemia, and if folic acid is given at a higher level, there can be an unmasking of other iron deficiencies, other deficiencies due to vitamin B12. So can we take it as a public health policy at a national level, and what are the risks involved? But to each individual family, can we advise this? This is a very easy and a simple solution which can be done. So if any one child is born with this, then the mother has to take folic acid till the next child is born. And the main problem is, when do we give this folic acid? Do we give it after the mother becomes pregnant? Do we give it after she is 3rd month of pregnancy? Or do we give it after she is 9th month of pregnancy? But the current recommendations in our country, all the mothers, they receive their iron and folic acid supplementation nearly during the, after the completion of the 3rd month. They do not take it in the 1st trimester. But what happens? This neural tube is formed by then. So when we identify a mother as pregnant, and then we start giving her the supplement, but before you start giving the supplement, the tube is already formed and the defect is already there. So when do we give the folic acid supplement? So this current scenario, is it adequate? So us nutritionists, as policy makers, we need to discuss how this can be done. And when we had a meeting along with the villagers, they came up with a better solution. We had in 2 blocks in Kanjipuram district, we conducted an infant mortality survey, and then we asked them why these children die in your place. And each child that is being dead in the block was marked on a map. And this is a part of a home-based newborn care study where after the child reaches the home from the hospital, why the child dies. So as a part of this study, Manamati block we recruited few home-based volunteers, and they went house to house, and then they marked in each block or each panchayat the household where each child died. And then they also did the same in the Salawakam block. Then finally with the villages, we sat and discussed like so many babies have died in your place and what are all preventable. To our surprise, in Salawakam block, 70% of the babies that died had congenital malformations. So it was a brute shock to us and also to the villages why the children in their block had congenital malformation. So in the village, we had a home-based volunteers meeting as well as elderly ladies, and then each one of them was saying some speculation, some postulation. So one was saying, Madam, in our village now they have started a new factory, and the factory's effluent is coming near our paddy field, and it is dark and it is foul smelling. We eat the rice, so the children are born. Is it because of that? And some of them were saying, is it because of some problem in the genetics? Or did we not marry a proper girl into our family? So each one was saying different things. But then some of them are also talking about the food that they eat. So when we told them that one which can be prevented is being folate, and this folate should be given just before pregnancy. When do we catch the mother to give that? So one village lady said, in our village we have a ceremony called Parusam, where the person gives a ring or he gives a gift to the lady, and usually there will be a 3 to 4 months of gap between that engagement and the marriage. So if we can ask the a girl who is getting married to take these folate tablets, then her folate level will be high, and this kind of malformation, which is preventable due to nutrition deficiency, can be avoided. So we discussed with this, and then some of them, they went back to the village and they even told the village leaders, because the village leaders are always given some invitation whenever there is a function. So they told them that because in our village, we have so many congenital malformations, now we have to talk to the families and postpone the marriage at least for 3 to 4 months, and ask the young girls to have folic acid so that her periconceptional means before she becomes pregnant, her folic acid level is high. And I'm really happy to say, in a small village, small hamlet, just by discussing the problems in the village among themselves and just showing the data from their village to them, and they were able to take this decision. And the home-based newborn care program was going on successfully for 1.5 years. But after that, our district was not selected for the Ayush project. So for the Asha project, so we could not continue further. But I would say like this is an example of how we can do work locally to improve the nutrition of the people. And then we also talk to them about the green leafy vegetables, especially spinach, which contains high folic acid, and then to have Moringa kira, that is drumstick leaf in their backyard, which will really improve the iron status of the families. So the grassroots education and family-centered care are very important. Though at the national level, we can have many policies, but then for them to reach at the doorsteps and then to take efforts at the doorsteps, only people like us can do the change. The next important thing, which is very much worrying currently, is the low birth weight that is happening across the globe. So now, if you see this map, India is classified as a country with a partial data. Even the whole of Southeast Asia is classified as a country with a partial data, but 26.4% of the low birth weight babies of the whole world is being born in India. And this is the map of the low birth weight in the country. And if you see the map, most of the places, the percentage of low birth weight babies are more than 20%. And this is the NFHS data where our hospital is situated. And here, if you see the national level, 50% of the mothers are anemic and 23% are underweight. And mothers who had antenatal checkup is only 21% in the as per the data. So, and then women who are married before 18 was 26.8%. So because of these kind of data, our low birth weight rate is very high. And now if you take the data from 2016 till now, over the past 5 years, like our hospital data has got 20% of all the deliveries or low birth weight. And these low birth weight babies are admitted in the neonatal intensive care, and nearly 53.8% of the admissions are low birth weight, because other than the babies who are born here, babies born in the nearby districts are also referred here. So low birth weight, is it a problem or is it a hidden problem? Is it a striking problem? I feel like low birth weight, it creates a chain. So now Diwali is coming near, and you see like there are a kind of crackers where there'll be a chain of crackers will be together in one big packet. And if you just light one, the rest of the crackers will continue cracking, and you cannot stop in the middle. So similarly, this low birth weight has got a problem before being born, and after being born, it doesn't stop with that. It sends the problem to the next childhood, to the adolescence, and to the next generation as well. So especially in our country, anemia in pregnancy is a real problem. In our state, by 2022, we should have 24%, but the current status of anemia prevalence is 44%. Though the babies born to anemic mothers are not anemic, but they have the problem of prematurity and low birth weight. So why do we start this nutritional garden? So why did we start? Because we have to break the cycle in one place. If you just see here, the maternal malnutrition, it brings a vicious cycle of a fetal malnutrition. And when the baby is malnourished, it is born as a low birth weight baby. And this low birth weight baby grows as an underweight child. And that underweight child grows up as an underweight adolescent. And again, she becomes a mother. So this cycle continues. So this, you call it as a intergeneration cycle of low birth weight. So if we see a child who is low birth weight, and then she hands over the problem of this low birth weight not only to her generation, to her child, she also hands over to the next generation. So as nutritionists, as pediatricians, and as policy makers, really we need to work hard to stop this low birth weight at one stage. If you just see here, this is a grandmother in my unit, and this grandmother, she was born as a very small baby in her young age, and then she grew up into an adolescent and a very low birth weight mother, and then she gave birth to her daughter. She was also a low birth weight, and now her weight is less than 40 kg, and now she had again given birth to a baby who's only 2 kilograms. So what will happen is this cycle will continue, but not only that, now we are very much worried about non-communicative diseases. These low birth weight babies, when they grow up, they are more prone for non-communicable diseases. And then when this baby grows up and as an adult, is more prone for diabetes and hypertension. So it is our responsibility to stop this cycle. But how do we stop? because they are in the community, and then really we don't have a chance or access to all of them. But at least if we have a garden, these people, when they come to our hospital, to our center, each garden in each stage of month of life, we can give some education, and then we can give them nutrition. At least the next child is not born as a low birth weight. And there are a lot of traditional methods in our society which we have already forgotten. So actually, when we go to any rural village, if we talk to the grandparents, they will say they have a function which is called as this Molapari function. So actually, what does it mean? So this is a function which is meant for the female goddess, where it inculcates the behavior of the men to change, so that the women is looked upon as a goddess. And then when they worship the goddess, they also plant these seeds at home. And then depending upon the fertility of the soil, and depending upon the rain and humidity of that region, of that particular year, the growth of the plant will be good. And many adolescent young girls and young mothers and young women will be participating in this, and each one of them will be proudly showcasing the plant that they have grown, which they are giving to their deity. But in actually, it indicates, indirectly, it indicates the fertility of the society. If the garden is fertile, that year the fertility of the village will be good, and the women will give birth to normal children. So this is the our one of our old traditions, which is not slowly dying away. And then the traditional anemia prevention in the villages is again, now we talk a lot about the adolescent girls. So in olden days and in many traditional families, still if any child, girl child, when she attains puberty, for the next 14 days or 21 days, she is given black gram dal. It's a kind of a ball with oil and jaggery. And the grandmother, she always tells her, this helps you to build the calcium, so that when you grow up as an adult or an adolescent, your bone will be good, and you will not have the menstrual problems, and the childbirth will be good. So the jaggery is for iron, and this oil is for free fatty acids and for calories. So each girl traditionally is given anemia prevention by the traditional families. And because now the grandmothers do not stay with us, so we need to inculcate these habits again in the families. Now, I just want to tell about the first 1,000 days of life. I think I need not talk much about it to the nutritionist, but for the students, I would like to say why this is important. Because the first 1,000 days of life, the first 270 days is within the womb period, and now the child is born, and the next first year of life is 365 days, and the next second year is 365 days. So this 1,000 days is mainly important for the brain growth. So now the Western world talks more about this 1,000 days. Previously, we were talking about anemia and pregnancy, but now the Western world says that we need to even think more about the periconceptional age. And the traditional families in our society have already started this long time before. So whenever a girl attains puberty, her nutritional status, her calorie status, her iron and her calcium level should be high by taking all this. So our society actually talks even before the 1,000 days of life. And the optimal development of the brain requires nutrition. But however, do we think food alone is essential for the growth of a human being? No. More than food, we need more love, care, compassion, and we need a sensory stimulation in the form of hearing and vision. But what do we have in our society to stimulate this young brain before it is born? So there is a womb with a view. Now many new literature is coming regarding sensory development of the babies in the womb. So do the babies hear when they are in uterus? Do the babies hear, smell when they are in uterus? Yes. Now many studies have come regarding music therapy and all that. But these are all randomized trial which has been done recently. But our forefathers have already had all these in mind. And in many societies, we have this baby shower or a Valegapu ceremony. So if we ask any grandmother, she will say, whenever the mother, she moves her bangles, that small tinkling sound will stimulate the baby's hearing. Actually, in my unit, we have a neonatal intensive care unit, and one of our nurse, when she was pregnant, she had this ceremony, and next day she removed her bangles, and then she came to the hospital because we have to practice strict hand hygiene. But she said, Madam, when I removed my bangles, my grandmother said, why do you remove the bangles? Because if there is not enough stimulation, your baby cannot hear. Your baby will become deaf. So I was really surprised because now many randomized trials are talking about sensory stimulation, but this has been practiced in ages in our society long time before, but we did not understand the science behind it. The first 1,000 days of life is not only a neuroscience, but it talks more about the mental well-being of the mother and also the quality of the relationships and the attachment. So what do I mean about the mental well-being? It's not enough just to give food to the mother. Even if the mother is sad, or if the mother-in-law or somebody says one angry word, that acts on the baby system. So that we call it, the mother becomes stressed, and not only she is stressed, she emulates the hormone which becomes toxic, and that is called as a toxic stress. So it's a big science to deal with the child unborn because no toxin should reach the baby. And there is one more thing about stress and nutrition. How do we eat? Are we stressed? So do we eat and the same time do we watch television? So whenever there is a violent movie or whenever there is a very sad or a crying serial, you watch it and then you eat. And how the stress affects you and how the stress affects each cell and the baby inside you. Because both the brain and the body not only absorb the nutrition, they also absorb the emotion and the environment around us. So the stress is very important factor which affects the cognitive and the physical factors. So a baby is exposed to toxic stress, and what happens because this baby is distressed later in life. So now we see there are some children, they adapt well in school, they're able to study well, but there are some children who are not able to withstand even a small stress, and then either they become violent or they become suicidal or they even become more violent towards the men. So when does it start? It's not later. It starts, the toxic stress starts in utero. And how the stress starts for the mother. So if the mother is depressed or anxious, or if the mother has got a bad relationship, or if there is a violence or abuse, or even if there is a food insecurity, all these become a toxic and then it affects the baby. So what happens is whenever somebody is stressed, they release the steroid. So whenever a mother is in toxic stress, there is a high level of steroid in the amniotic fluid, that fluid which surrounds the baby, and it has got a negative effect on the cognitive development of the child. And now, like here, this is a picture where a Western lady, like she is stressed and then she goes for cigarettes immediately. And we all know that cigarette is injurious to health, but not only cigarette, any harsh word, any anger, or even if a mother who's pregnant and then she has got a deadline, if she's working in the computer industry, and then if she's working late at night to finish her projects, or she has got a target to complete, all these act like a stress in her and she releases the stress hormone. Now let us see how many generations these stress affect. Because she is the mother, she is the first generation, and then she feels the stress. And not only that, that toxic stress through her blood and hormones reaches her baby, and this baby is the fetus, and that fetus is the second generation affected by the stress. But then, not only that, that baby also has got reproductive cells. So, reproductive cells means these babies' reproducing cells are also stressed. So, that becomes the third generation stress. So, any small stress that is being given to the mother not only affects her, it affects the next three generations. So, that is why in our culture, the mother is asked to take into her parental home where she can be relaxed and enjoy her pregnancy. Now, because of our changing culture, all this is changing, and all working mothers are pregnant and they are stressed. And our government policy gives them leave after they have delivered the child, but not before the pregnancy. So we should make the environment to be more conducive to have a normal pregnancy. And the earliest experiences in the mother's womb shapes the baby's brain, and this is called as plasticity of the brain. So this baby's brain can be like a plastic, and which can be adaptive or it can be maladaptive. If you give a good stimulation, like a Valagapu ceremony or talking nice to the mother and giving her whatever she wants, the food she likes, then the plasticity will be good and the baby will be adapted to be a nice life. But if things go wrong, then that will be a problem. A next important one is the food time and the eye contact. Now, if you this is a child in my unit, and here you can see this child is having the phone and then it is watching a cartoon, and the same time the mother is feeding the child. So when we told the mother it's not good, you can reduce the screen time, she said, without the phone, my child will start crying and he will not have any food. So it is our duty to train the mothers and the grandparents to wean the babies off the screen time. So because nowadays all these phones, they become the babysitters and then they give more stress to the children and the mothers. So this is how the child's the parenting should be. There should always be eye contact between the mother and the child. So here in this picture, you can see the child sees the mother, and from the mother, the loving emotion is being referred back to the child, and this helps in the cognitive growth of the child. So the relationships are very important. And we need to have a stimulation in a safe and a protective environment. And infants and babies who are spoken with, played with in a kind, loving way have the mental, social, and emotional tools to cope with stress later. So here you can see the picture of two MRI brains, and on the left side you can see the picture of the brain which is normal, where the connections are normal, and the other one is the child is in an orphanage. It is one famous picture in the Romanian orphanage where the children are given food, but there is no adequate cuddling, no adequate talking, no adequate hugging. So when there is sensory input less, in spite of giving adequate food, the neuronal connection are less and the cognitive and other behavioral problems are more. So in conclusion, many things we can need in this lifetime. But a child cannot wait. Now the time the child's bone is formed and his mind is developed. So as a nutritionist and as a child health specialist, it is our responsibility to see to that this 1,000 days of life message is spread across the society. And to the child, we cannot say tomorrow because the child's name is today. Slowly over time. So now many of you students who are listening may think, is it possible in our society? Because the government is framing the policies, all agriculture policies are being framed by the government. And in each household, the televisions are there. And then each family has got a phone. And then now there is so much of addiction to the media, the screen time. So is it possible for us to change the behavior of our people slowly over time? If all of us strive, we can do it. In relationships with opportunities, we need to take small steps which can be practiced and which are rewarded. So with this in mind, we started because we thought this is the nutrition park, the picture of that which is being developed currently at Chengalpattu Medical College. And here is the waiting area, and the mother, she will get the nutrition messages, and then she will walk into the nutrition garden. And then here we have divided into so many zones, and depending upon her pregnancy, because, for example, if a mother who comes initially in the first trimester, she will gain more information about the folic acid and about her pregnancy and about what care she has to take care. And the mother who comes towards the second trimester, she will get more information about iron and calcium. And the mother who comes in the third trimester, she will have more information about the delivery and about breastfeeding. And then this is a zone where after delivery, where they will be getting more information about breastfeeding and how to improve lactation and the food that supplies or improves the lactation in the mother. And then after 6 months, if the mother comes with a baby, she will get information about weaning food. And then after 1 year, she will get more information about the other, how to stimulate the child and all that. So at each month of pregnancy and each gestation, not only the mother, the family also will receive information how they need to take care of that child and her daughter or the daughter-in-law, so that each mother has a respectful pregnancy and a respectful childbirth. So this is the total view, and then this is being done in collaboration with the MS Swaminathan Foundation. And this park is being funded by the Indian Oil Corporation. And ACOM is one of the NGO who is involved in the child health throughout the country, and different parts of the country is helping us. And Akarma Design is currently helping in building this project. So what is the future and how do we collaborate? So now there are many people in this audience, nutritionists. So how do we collaborate and how do we plan for the future? So one is, like, though we may not have a much say over the government policy or the family at large, at least we can think what we can do for our own campus. Many of us are attached to some educational institution, and we need to see to that our campuses are breastfeeding friendly. Now I see, like, many mothers, when they, after the delivery, they come to the hospital, but then, or they go to the workplace and then they leave the job because they are not able to breastfeed their child. They have the breast engorgement, but they're not able to breastfeed the child. And our whole system is not supporting to have a mother breastfeeding as well as taking care of her work. But if you take other Western countries, and even as per the Government of India guidelines, we should have a crutch if there are more than 50 female workers are employed in any institution. But still, we are a long way to implement. It is there as a policy, but it has not come as a practice. So we should have a place where a mother, she can breastfeed, or whether she can express the breast milk and then she can take back to the child. And if she wants, she can bring the child home for work, and there should be a crèche where she can leave the child and she can take the child back home. So now, because the joint family system is breaking and many people are moved out of their ancestral home, it is a felt need to improve the nutrition of the child. And many of our campuses and educational institutions, we have the NSS initiatives. So what our NSS can do, we have a lot of initiatives we do for others, but our own colleagues, we do not do much. So we have our canteen, which displays the price of each food. But if you go to the hospital where I studied in John Hopkins, the canteen not only shows the price of food, it also shows the calorie of each food. So it will say the calorie for the burger, calorie for the salad, and then calorie for a pizza. So as a student or a teacher in the campus, we can have the choice what we can do. So these are all small initiatives we can take as an NSS initiative in our own institution. And then we need to establish a life cycle garden. Actually, this is my dream, to have a womb to tomb garden. Actually, we have a space, but unfortunately, we do not have the funding. So we can come together and then experiment and collaborate, so that, because now we have developed this 1,000 days of life garden. Then after that, we can start a child park area and the garden, followed by an adolescent garden, which will talk about adolescent issues, which talk about drugs, which talks about menstrual hygiene, and then about a garden regarding the adult midlife, where about the diabetes and hypertension, and about the bone health and about eye health. And then finally, there should be a garden for the old people, or a geriatric garden, where there should be messages about how to take care of themselves, how to take care of their bone health, how to prevent their fall. So all these can be incorporated. So wherever we are, we can create small gardens, and each garden can be more informative. So people can come there, they can relax, they can release their stress. Nowadays, we don't even call it stress, it's the toxic stress. So we can release the toxic stress, and then we can have a fresh air in the garden and go back with the fresh ideas. Now in Chengalpattu Medical College, we also have an idea of giving a plan for each child that goes from our hospital. So now the plan is like, after delivery, a mother who is discharged will be given a discharge summary, her family planning advice. She'll be given an immunization card. Along with that, if she have a space to grow, she will be given a plant. So she can go and then take the plant home. And in the child's memory, she can plant it, and then she can water the plant. And at the end of the 1 year, along with the immunization card, she can bring the card. And if the plant has grown well, she can ask for one more plant. Actually, we did this experiment in Katangulathur block for the celebration of the first birthday, and many parents were happy. And they said, Madam, please give us a mango tree. Madam, please give us teak tree. And each one of them took one sapling, and then they did it, they planted it on the first birthday of their child. So maybe we can now, I hope we have funding for that. And if this successful, this model can be replicated anywhere. Now, this why I talk more about this garden and trees is not only these are nutritionally important. Recently, during the COVID pandemic, the very heart-wrenching problem for us is everybody was crying for oxygen. And every day we used to get phone call, Madam Yadav, can you please arrange one oxygen bed? Can you please arrange one oxygen bed? Then it was very difficult for us to arrange oxygen bed. Somehow we managed, and then we also arranged the oxygen concentrators. But how do these oxygen concentrators work? They concentrate the oxygen from the atmosphere. So unless we plant more trees, unless we enhance the oxygenation of our biosphere, then now there is a problem of global warming also. So now whenever a child is getting discharged from a unit, because it's the intensive care unit, always I think, oh, this child should have a normal growth. This child should have a normal neurodevelopment. But nowadays, whenever I discharge a child, I think This child should have adequate water. This child should have adequate oxygen when the child grows. So now this is a collective responsibility of all of us, not only as nutritionists, not only as a pediatrician, as a human being in the society. We need to plant trees, develop nutrition gardens, and then enhance the life for the society, for the future of the children. Nowadays, many families, the parents think what I can invest for my child. Like, can I buy gold? Can I buy land? No, whatever gold or land you have, if your child do not have proper nutrition, if the child do not have proper oxygen, then all this saving is not going to help. Like we could see like many rich people coming and begging for oxygen beds. So it is our responsibility to develop these nutrition gardens across the country, and we have to reduce our carbon emission and also reduce the global warming. And we need to be a role model for the students and also for the society. I thank all of you for the patient listening. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I think it's time to take up the questions now. Participants, can you post your questions in the chat there?
Madam, I have a question.
Sir, you are going to ask a question, sir. Sheshagiri, sir.
Yes, madam, I thought I can ask, but madam is not
Yes, sir.
seen.
Huh?
Madam is not seen, it seems. It's there. Fine, madam. Madam, I want to ask a few questions, one or two questions at least. One is, it's wonderful you brought in the indigenous, traditional knowledge along with the modern systems. What we were, brushing aside as useless in those days, now we are bringing it back as kind of reinventing the wheel. We are doing wonderful. And in between, you are talking about the collaborations. How this collaboration can be worked out? Any idea, madam? In what way organizations can participate and taking these ideas forward?
You're not audible.
You talked about collaborations. How do we take these organizations join hands in this collaborative effort? Am I audible, madam? I'll put the chat box.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Hello. Yeah, madam, I'm Kailash here, Dr. Satya, Kailash Kant from Indian Oil. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Sir, I will answer your question. Actually, we are sponsoring the project there at Government Hospital Chengalpet for the nutrition garden.
Okay.
The project cost is around 45 lakhs. Dr. Satya has approached us with a request letter that they are going to create such a facility. So we were impressed with the project, and we wanted to support them and help them, bring their dreams come true. It fits into the CSR, corporate social responsibility. If you go through Schedule 7 Companies Act,
Right.
all what all things can be done under CSR is in detail given there. You can go to that and approach the companies. Hope I answered your query.
No, I'm not asking the general question. I'm talking about madam's very specific interest.
I'll answer, sir. Can I answer now?
Please, madam.
No, you'd asked like how an organization can participate in a collaborative effort.
Yes.
Yes. No, it's because like each place we can do the study, like what's the problem in each place, because the problem in a village will be different, because the problem in the towns will be different, and the problems in the semi-urban areas will be different. So we can, as the institutions, we can just see like what is the population in our area locally, and then for that problem, like what we can do. Because I think now many Rotaries are coming for initiation of the gardens, but and the corporation, they are willing to give the space for that. So like many organizations, we need to collaborate. So we need to present our data to the local collectorate, and we need to give the space get the space from them. And then like Rotary can support us in initially identifying the plants and then getting procurement for that. But then as a long run, to sustain that garden, so we need to have the local population support. So like local volunteers or NSS groups or somebody we all can come together, and then each garden has got different components. Not only that, there are a lot of health education messages have to be displayed.
Yes.
So for that, like arts, people who are interested in arts, they can do the artwork in the garden, and they can also do the displays in the garden. And then some people are very good in making films. So like railway stations, like we have small televisions which displays the messages. Actually now this nutrition garden, we have got 18 points where mothers can sit, and each place we can have a small television set, and a group of nutritionists and an artist can come together, and then we can make health educations. And in case if an adolescent girls come to the garden, and the whole set will be different, like a different kind of activities. And if a young mother comes, it will be different. If a grandmother comes, it will be different. So we can make different kinds of activities which is available depending upon the resources that we have. We can do it, sir. And actually, we need to have more surveys in our own society, because what we find is like all this NSHS data and our government data are very different, but when we really go into the community, and what I find is the mothers who are very much malnourished and who deliver low birth weight babies are not mainly from Tamil Nadu, but they're all the workers who come as construction workers from Orissa, Telangana and Bihar. So many people, they work here, and then they do not come under any of the government schemes, and they do not have the antenatal checkup, and they don't get iron and folic acid.
Migrant laborers.
Yeah, so we need to focus on these mothers. I mean, if we can just get a data of all these anemic mothers from where they come from, then we can focus some for that area. So, so as researchers, we can get field data, and then from the data, we can go and work for it. And then we can also collaborate with the agricultural universities, how we can help the kitchen gardening, or whatever the limited space constraint we have, how we can do in our own society. So agriculturalists, policy makers, and then IAS officers, Rotary Club people, and philanthropists, nutritionists. I think many of us should come together to work on this.
Wonderful, madam. Thank you so much. I think after we discuss, we can go to Indian Oil and ask for support, what he said. But before that, we need to do a lot of activities to come up with a correct proposal for target people.
Yeah.
Thank you, madam. And I have one more question, madam. You said the nutrition is important. And incidentally, 2 days back, there was a very interesting lecture on meat by one scientist from National Research Center Meat, if I am right. He was talking about the importance of meat, and meat is more important for life, he was telling. Do you think meat is an important requirement? Can we sustain population with only vegetarian food?
But actually, we feel like as the pediatricians, we feel the fish is more important than meat.
Right. Thank you, madam.
And because now what I find is like after, especially after the lockdown, we find many children who are obese. And so now malnutrition is one problem and obesity is one problem. So children, especially who take meat or nowadays they are obese, and especially young girls who take the broiler chicken, they are having obesity and they also have the polycystic disease problem, and then they have a lot of menstrual issues because lots of hormone is being injected into these animals to become fat. So which is really not good in our place. But fish doesn't have that kind of a problem.
Thank you, madam. Thank you so much.
Ma'am, hi, I have a question to ask, ma'am. Ma'am, can you hear me, ma'am?
Yeah.
Ma'am, this is, I don't know how far it is true, but there is a practice of feeding donkey's milk once a child is born. Is there any scientific basis or why do we follow it? This is an age-old practice. We really are wondering why it is, and nobody has, in fact, stopped. Like the government was also like promoting. It's not like direct promoting, but you see donkeys in every maternity hospital. It's actually stationed there. What is the reason, ma'am?
Yeah, actually, even I was thinking it is not good. Like for the past 20 years, we had been advising the mothers not to give donkey milk. But especially the people around the villages, they have a belief that if a donkey's milk is given, the child's health will be good and the voice will be good. And even one day of donkey's milk is very expensive. It costs 200 to 300 rupees. And they bring a very malnourished donkey and then they supply that milk to more than 100 or 150 families. But what they do is they get little bit of donkey milk and then they add other milk or, they add, even if they add other milk, it's okay. But to look more thicker, they add other powders, which is also not good. And mostly these donkeys, they lie on the very dirty surface. And that milk is not good. So I was always telling the mothers not to give donkeys milk. And actually, I would like to tell you an anecdote which happened about 10 years before. Near Tirukalakuntram, a mother, she was given a donkey milk to a baby. And then that baby unfortunately developed infection over the gut. And that baby became very sick. And then when the baby came here, the abdomen was very much distended. And we thought we may not be able to save the child. And the baby was bleeding everywhere. And then we have to give blood transfusion and give high antibiotics. And then we just asked them, like, what happened? Why you didn't give breast milk? And then they said the donkey milk is given. And we told them, no, don't give such things because these are all harmful for the child. But unfortunately, what happened? The father was very angry. He said he doesn't want to live with the mother because she is the main person who is responsible for the child's illness. And then they had a Ur Panchayat, the village elders meet. And then he said that he wants to divorce that lady. And in that village, they were discussing why this came, and they said a doctor who was in the intensive care unit said the donkey's milk is not good, and this child has become sick because of that. And then the elder person, he came, he said, madam, do you want to say that? But now I didn't want the family to be separated. So I said, no, I told because it is not clean, I asked you not to take, but don't leave the wife just because of this. And then somehow, I had to talk to the village headman and then tell them it's okay. But, because at that time, really, I didn't know how to salvage the family problem. And the child also got discharged and later they were doing well. But now recently we have been reading literature about the donkey's milk, and I saw about a study from North India. I don't remember the place, maybe Pune, where they have studied the composition of the donkey's milk, and then they found like whether cow's milk, because mostly our societies we give cow's milk, but what they found that the donkey's milk composition is very similar to the mother's milk in terms of the protein quality, the protein calories and other amino acids. And the cow's milk comes only later. But I was really surprised, and then I was thinking, oh, that time the village panchayat said it's okay to give donkey's milk. But now it is also come proved scientifically, because they have done some studies and then they have studied the amino acids and the lactose in the donkey's milk as well as the cow's milk. And then they found that donkey's milk is a little bit similar to the mother's milk when compared to the cow's milk. But these are all the scientific studies coming recently. But the government has not made any policy regarding that. So at present, I'm not in a position to say whether it is good or bad. So this is a scientific observation.
Thank you, ma'am. There's a question asked by one of the student, ma'am. She says in most of the villages, the children are underweight. So mothers are only trying to give biscuits and kanji to make their stomach full. As a nutrition student, how do I change their mindset? That's a question asked.
Yeah, but one thing is we can make the growth card for each child, and then we can show the mother the growth card. We can just tell them like your child is at birth, your child is here, and then now your child is here. So in the growth card, if the child is falling below the 10th percentile, so if the child is either an underweight child or if it is a stunted child, we can tell the mother like what you are giving is not adequate, because mostly even a child who is well fed, some upper class families or middle class, they may think my child is not doing well. So most of the mothers, they feel that their child is not doing well. So only by marking the growth card, because nowadays, like many of them, they have the growth card in the ICDs in the villages, and then now the villages or the village ICDS people, they're having the Poshan Abhiyan app. So in that app, if the child's weight is entered and the age is entered or the child's height is entered, immediately it tells whether the child is normal or undernourished or whether it is stunted. So with that, we can just tell the mother whether the child is okay or not. So if the child is not okay, then we have to talk to the mother like what you are giving is not adequate. We cannot simply change the diet. Whatever the mother is already giving, we can add nutrition, we can add extra nutrient to it. In case if the mother is giving half idli, we can ask her to give one idli, or she can add some oil or ghee on the top, or she can add 1 teaspoon of sugar on the top, so which will increase the caloric value. So if the child is taking 1 biscuit, we can ask her to take 2 biscuits. So gradually we can change the diet, but we cannot completely change all at once. But we can tell them like what else the child likes most. So most of the mothers will say my child likes chocolate and biscuits. So instead of chocolate, we can ask them to supplement to the groundnut burfi, because the kadla mittai, so that contains more of iron as well as nutrients. So we can ask her to give that. And some mothers, they also give banana. So whatever the child takes, we can ask them to take extra quantity, and then you plot on the graph and then show them how the child is doing. And you have to tell them, if you take this calorie extra, then when I do after 15 days, then the growth curve should go higher. And if the child is still not doing well, then child has to be brought to a doctor and then they're shown what's the problem.
Thank you, ma'am. Any more questions?
Like I have one question from posted by Sharana Stalin. Madam, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Personally, I took folate 8 months before conceiving. My daughter still had spina bifida.
Okay.
So, and the doctor told her it may be because her parents or grandparents have occult spina bifida.
There are for that spina bifida, it's not only folate, madam. There can be also be some genetical problem. The epigenetic problem can also be there, and then environmental problems can also be there. But folate is one of the cause for spina bifida.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, there is one more question. I'll just.
I think to iron and folic acid.
Ma'am, can you hear me, ma'am?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there is some question about
question.
iron and folic acid, vitamin C intake through locally available. Yes, we have to take locally available food very often because nowadays people are in the habit of going to the supermarket and then buy some food which is grown somewhere else and then which is being in the refrigerator. But actually locally grown food like amla, guava, they have more vitamin C. And especially whenever a mother who takes iron, if she takes vitamin C before taking the iron, the absorption is good. For example, if she takes an amla juice or if she takes a lemon juice and then take the iron, the bioavailability and the absorption will be good. So we need to encourage the families to take more locally available food. And there is a question about orphanages. Yeah, orphanages are a real problem. It's not only the nutrition, there is a lack of stimulation for them because they lack the love, warmth, the hugging and cuddling of the by the natural family members. So for any child that grows in the orphanage, definitely we need to follow a growth chart, a nutrition chart, and we need to tell them to do that properly. And then some orphanages, they've got only one caretaker for about 10 to 15 children or even 50 children. So we need to tell them to change the practice because only one lady can take care of only 2 to 3 people, to have intense care. Or we should have some, volunteers visit the orphanages and then play with the children and then give them more play therapy sessions, art therapy sessions, to stimulate the brain growth and make them feel more inclusive into the society. And there is a question about what is the scope for pediatric nutrition and what are the opportunities. Yeah, pediatric nutrition is a growing field, and now it's because of both malnutrition as well as overnutrition are there. So it is a growing field, and I encourage your students to take a pediatric nutrition. And somebody had asked, can we visit the nutrition garden? Yes, now currently our garden is being constructed. Actually, the money was sanctioned sometime before, but due to the COVID, we could not do the work because nobody was willing to come inside the hospital and work for us. So now the work has started. And I think within before the end of this month, the garden wall and everything will be completed. And next month, we will be having the plantation. Maybe by January end, the garden will be ready for you to come and visit. And I encourage students to come in batches to come and visit the garden. And even if you want, you can get permission from your madams and you can get involved during the plantation if you want.
Meenakshi, there are no more questions. You can go for vote of thanks, Meenakshi. Doctor, thank you very much, doctor. It was a wonderful talk, very useful. And definitely we will see in what way we can help to develop the Nutri Garden. We will also take it to other places too.
Ma'am, I'll just finish with one last question, ma'am. Can I, ma'am?
Yeah, please.
Ma'am, we are facing the dual problem, as you say, overweight and underweight on the other side. Underweight, it's been there for a long time. Today, you are having a very, I would say, it's a rampant problem, right, ma'am? Obesity, especially childhood. Yeah. So how are you addressing from your side, ma'am? Being in a government sector, how do you handle the children? Because parents especially in India, we try to relate fat as being healthy. That is how we are, the mindset is framed. So how is it, ma'am? Is it easy to tackle this childhood obesity?
No, it's actually a very difficult problem because when we asked one of the local schools, we gave a dissertation to one of our postgraduate students to study the adolescent obesity in a school between classes 9, 10, 11, and then to suggest some intervention to the families. So we told the headmaster that we will come and then we will take the weight of the children, and then we will classify them as normal and obese children alone we will take for study. But before our team could visit the school, the headmaster himself, he collected about more than 300 children, and all of them were assembled in one big hall. And he said, Madam, இது எல்லாமே குண்டு பசங்க தான், நீங்க வெயிட்டே எடுக்கவே வேண்டாம். And we were really shocked to see that a whole school of children were obese. And then when we asked the lifestyle of those children, it was very sad to say that these children, they have to come for morning tuition and then they have evening tuition, and they don't have any time for physical exercise for them. And then for the parents also, whenever the parents are not there, they give food as a substitute. And many of these children, they have the capacity to call and dial the food that they want, so they can they order for Swiggy and other things, and then they get food. And it is a very lower middle class school, and we were really surprised. Even these children, they have access to this kind of facility. And many of these children, they were taking either pork or red meat on Saturdays and Sundays because that was the cheap food that was available. Then we call the parents and then we talk to them that how the child is like this, and it will affect the child's studies. And many families, they thought if they get a pizza or a burger, then the child will get good mark in the next exam. And if a child gets score some good mark, then they try to get him a phone, or they try to get him take them to a expensive hotel. So they think it's a kind of bribing the child to do good well in exams. But actually, when they become more obese, their metabolism slows, and then they're not able to study well. And now we find many obese children, they are developing hypertension and many renal problems. So we talked to the parents, and the parents said they're also helpless because their whole family food pattern is different. So then we thought like we will send them messages every day. All the 300 children's phone number was, the parents' phone number was collected by our postgraduate student, and every week he was sending messages to them about the healthy lifestyle, healthy food, how they can change. But in spite of 1 year of intervention, we could not find any change in the weight of those children, and those children, they remained obese. So I think now adolescent health is a bigger issue, and as a nutritionist, we need to have a family-centered participation. And in many schools now, we have only there's a parent-child meeting, a parent-teachers meeting alone is there. But now, along with that, we should have a parent nutrition meeting, and then a parent behavioral meeting, where we should have to counsel them about the importance of exercise, because if the child exercise well, then the child will be alert, then the marks will be good. And then we have to tell the families about the food, how they can ration the food. And as I told you earlier, now most of the school canteens and the shop outside, they give very unhealthy food for the children. And most of them, or even have got some lace of some drugs incorporated into the food, so that these still come back again and again for those kind of food. So as a nutritionist, it is we have to take it as a public health issue to send notices to the schools and the principals to give requests to the shops around not to sell such kind of food and beverages which is more addictive to the children, and then change them to the natural food. Because in Kerala also for a time they had all these beverages were changed to eleni, tender coconut and all that. So it needs a lot of willpower at the policy level And I think Nutrition Society of India will have a big say in shaping the policy of the government. So I think if we start at the government schools and the government colleges, definitely it can spread to the nearby institutions. And we need to definitely involve the families, not only talking to them about how badly they behave and how their mark is. We need to talk to them about the BMI of the child and then tell the family how they need to change their lifestyles.
Thank you, ma'am. I now request Dr. Varalakshmi Rajam to propose a vote of thanks.
Evening. On behalf of the Department of Nutrition, I take this opportunity to propose the vote of thanks for today's program organized to commemorate the World Food Day. Firstly, we thank Dr. Satya Jagannathan, Head Department of Pediatrics, Chengalpattu Medical College, for sparing her valuable time to deliver a lecture on Nutri Gardens for optimum nutrition and health. Madam, through your presentation with the informative messages, you have inspired all of us to start our own Nutri Gardens. Through this novel concept of developing Nutri Gardens, the disciplines like nutrition, horticulture, botany, and microbiology are brought close to the highly esteemed field of medicine and health. Madam, we thank you once again for being with us today. We profusely thank Dr. Sharifa Talha ma'am, President, Nutrition Society of India, Chennai chapter, for initiating this idea of celebrating the World Food Day and selecting the best speaker, Dr. Satya Jagannathan, and helping us in initiating each and every step of today's webinar. Thank you, ma'am, once again. On this occasion, we thank the management, principal, vice principals, aided and self-supporting of Ethraj College for Women, Dr. Muthu Meenakshi, Head of the Department of Nutrition, FSM and Dietetics, and staff members of the Nutrition Department of Ethraj College for Women for extending all support in making this event possible. We also thank the executive committee members of NSI Chennai chapter and Dr. Sundaram Seshadri and all the members of the IFTR for the continuous support and encouragement in organizing today's program. Big thanks to all the participants for making it to be a part of today's webinar. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, Varalakshmi.
And actually, yeah, art students as well as botanical students, horticulturists, I think everybody should help us.
So when do you require their help, ma'am?
I will ask our team, I'll come back to you.
Okay, ma'am. Please get in touch with me.
Okay, definitely.
Thank you.
Definitely.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you
Thank
very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Ma'am.